but I don't like being told what to do. Most men don't.
Right.
So is it not a humbling thing that you have to do to come to God and go, God, I can't bear this weight unless you help me?
What's going on, guys? So glad y'all joined us again today. This is Remo, and we're bringing the Kingsman podcast to you, where we're doing the call of men, finding their place, power, and purpose in the kingdom of God. And today with me again is one of our pastors, Resurrection Life, Todd Goodwin.
And I got all kind of questions.
Yeah, you asked a lot last time.
I do.
So last time we was talking, we got into some real interesting conversation, and it kind of ended, and we had to stop because of time. But we want to continue on where we left off. So if you were listening, you're at a good spot here today, and if you weren't, you can catch up with us. But we were talking about men being able to carry burdens and feeling the responsibility, right, as leaders, and where God's put them in their life to be leaders and be over certain things, their responsibility. How do they carry that burden? So he's trying to talk about, that's the question you asked me at the end.
Well, how do we carry that burden?
Well,
as followers of Jesus.
Right. As followers of Jesus, here's the good news. Even though God has put us where we're responsible, and man was created first, and we talked a little about that in the last podcast. If you think about responsibility, it's like I think of children, right? They don't feel a lot of responsibility. They don't have as many burdens yet, right? I have 4 children, and the younger they are, the less burden they feel.
Yeah.
But as we get older, we tend to feel more of those because we have more responsibility. But one thing, even with them, they know that even though they're over certain things that they feel responsible for, they're under me and they're under their mom, and they have someone they can go to, right? And so I think as Christians, it's important for men to understand, even though God's called us to a great responsibility, we have a big one, that we have someone to go to. We have, even though we're over something, we're also under something.
No, but as a man, I'm gonna just be honest with you. As a man, I don't like being told what to do. That may be because I'm more of an alpha male, but I don't like being told what to do. Most men don't.
Right.
So is it not a humbling thing that you have to do to come to God and go, God, I can't bear this weight unless you help me?
Yeah.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, it's a good thing, but you don't realize it's a good thing because I'm a perfect candidate for that question. Because my whole life, I grew up as a man's man, played a lot of sports, what you would call a man's man. You had to have this warrior mentality. You couldn't show tears. You didn't tell somebody you loved them. You was just tough, real hard, and just, that's the way you do it as a man. That's what I was taught. So in my life, I felt like to be a man, I had to always figure out a way, and I had to learn to carry my burdens myself and just be responsible for them, just deal with it, And there was that point in my life where the problems and the chaos and all the things that I was dealing with, as much as I wanted to say I can do it, I realized that I couldn't. And that was the most humbling experience, is to actually get to that point where I admit I need something bigger than me.
So you're actually saying, in order to be a kingdom man, we actually have to humble ourselves.
Humble and submit ourselves. I used to say, I was always taught, the way to win is to go get the victory, and when you look in the Bible, I think about Jacob. Jacob was that man's man. He's trying to figure out his own way his whole life. Mm-hmm. And he says, well, I'm going to figure out a way, until that problem got so big and it just exponentially grew. He didn't really know what to do. And then God, in his divine nature, broke him physically until the point he could admit and say, you know what, I'm Jacob and I need you. And the way to win is to lose. The way to victory is to surrender.
Okay. Let's unpack. How are we going to lose? What do you mean? Because I'm going to be honest with you, I don't like to lose.
Right.
I don't like to lose in anything.
Right.
My daughter told me one time, I asked her, you want to do this?
Right.
And she's like, no, Daddy, I don't want to. I said, why not? She goes, if I know I'm going to lose, I don't want to play.
Right.
I'm thinking, what do you mean, what have I got to lose?
Yeah, well, that's a good question again, because when I remember going to a youth event, and I was actually preaching that, and they was playing basketball, and the pastor had to pull me aside, and he said that I needed to calm down because I was spiking volleyballs on kids. We was getting a little crazy, but I told him, I said, even as Christians, I think we should. The Bible says run to obtain. We should run to win. We should play to win. But what I mean by lose is what Jesus said when he says a man loses his life, he finds it. And that's what happened with me. In my own application, when I finally said, God, I need you, and I got under what he wanted me to get under the whole time. That when we say he's Lord, that means he's over my life. And I said, I'm not big enough, but you are. That's when I found victory in my life.
That's when you found your life because you lost your life.
Exactly.
Did you find strength and humility?
It's a new life. There's no other way to really find strength.
But isn't that almost an oxymoron?
It is.
Because when if I humble myself, that means I'm making myself lesser?
Yeah.
Or do I become actually more of a man
Right.
by humbling myself?
Right. Well, I mean, that's the paradox. It's the paradox of the kingdom, you know. There's so many things. You lose your life, you gain your life, you know. If you humble yourself, you'll be exalted. I mean, it doesn't really make much sense.
How do I humble myself in a practical, everyday situation? I mean, because I'm sure a lot of men are listening going, well, what does that mean?
Right.
How do I humble myself? Beat myself down, tell me I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough? I don't think that's humility. That's humiliation.
Yes, sir, exactly. I
So
mean,
how would I humble myself in an everyday situation?
Well,
At home, whatever, work?
Well, I always like to use illustrations, and I know we're speaking on Christian terms, but just wherever your faith is, wherever you believe as a man, just take it as maybe if you want to take it as a story, we know it's a real account. But the greatest man I know to look to in my life now, it wasn't always this way, it was Jesus.
Yep.
And the Bible said that he humbled himself and took the cross. And because he did that, he was exalted. Now, Jesus was not weak. You see, I mean, he could have, there was a lot of things he could have did if he wanted to really do it. That sign of strength was being able to show humility even though he had the strength. And he could have did whatever he wanted. He said he humbled himself means he basically submitted to what was over him, which was his Father. He submitted to the will of the Father.
So how do I humble myself in my home to be able to lead?
Good question. So, I mean, the first thing we do when we say humble ourselves, it's not, I'll just be weak and whatever the world tells me or whatever my feelings tell me or whatever even my wife tells me. It's, what does God say? He's the one over me. What is God, what do you want me to do? I mean,
so that means you actually have to be in a relationship with God.
Absolutely.
You don't do it through your wife or through the church or through somebody else.
It's just one-on-one. Your personal relationship with Jesus.
Well, isn't that scary? Doesn't that make you very vulnerable as a man? I'm going to be honest with you. As a man, I don't like being vulnerable.
No. I mean, I don't think any of us are comfortable with that, being comfortable in our own skin. But when you've experienced what it does, like when it says in your weakness, his strength's made perfect, you tap into a strength that's not of your own. And when you experience that, there's nothing like it. You know, there's nothing like operating in God's power, operating in his purpose, in his place, some of the things we're talking about. And, you know, the best way I can do it is somebody would have told me when I was 16 years old, I would have been asking the questions you're asking and saying, man, that's crazy, man. But when there's going to be a point in life where the problems and the burdens and the things that you're dealing with are bigger than you, no matter how manly you are. I can look at men I looked up to. You look at Arnold Schwarzenegger right now, and I was like, man, I'm work out and be lifting up 500 pounds like him. But, you know, if you look at him right now.
Me too.
He's, yeah, you kind of look like you've been in the gym, huh?
Yeah.
The short sleeves you got going on right there. But, you know, you look at Arnold Schwarzenegger right now, man, you're like, man, this was the guy in Pumping Iron.
Yeah.
Because there's going to come a point, no matter how manly you think you are, that's not what gives you what you need. That's not fulfilling. That's not your strength. It's something bigger than you. And that's what he means by humbling yourself and just submit and saying, God, it doesn't mean for us to be weak and just submit to whatever comes our way.
You do have to have a vision as a man, but where do we get that vision from? I'm assuming we get it straight from God.
The one who created us.
Which means we have to humble ourselves, get into a relationship with him so that we can lead our family, so when we can find our place.
Get in line with him. One of the best stories in the Bible I can speak of to how to relate to that, God showed me one time, was there was this soldier. He was a centurion. I mean, it's a man. You know, he's over 100 soldiers. They fight wars. They do all kind of things. And I'm sure you know the story. But basically, he's got this man who's sick. One of his soldiers, maybe he's hurt, wounded, sick, whatever it may be. And he heard about Jesus. And he said, you know, he sent word for him to come heal this man. And Jesus was calm. He said, look, you don't even have to come in the house. I know you can just speak the word.
Because he understood authority.
Because he understood. He said, because I know you are a man set under authority like I am. And I read that word and said, set under authority like I am. I mean, how is he telling Jesus, you set under authority like I am? And this is what he showed me. He showed me that as a man, I'm over certain things. But the only reason, like that centurion, he says, I'm over 100 soldiers. But the only reason I'm over 100 soldiers is because I'm under somebody else. And Jesus said he marveled. It's the only time he said in the Bible, he marveled at this faith, that he understood the principles of authority that basically said, because I humble myself under the higher authority of me, he puts me over these men, which basically says, this is the way I like to say it, God will never put you over what he wants you to be over until you get under what he wants you to be under. And so we don't like to humble ourselves, man, and I've been that person, but I've also experienced the other side of it, that when I get in line, I just like to call it when we say under, when I get in line with God and what he wants for me to do, that's when he gives us the authority to do what he's called us to do as men.
So authority is not necessarily a positional thing.
Yeah, it's not a boss man kind of thing, right?
Yeah,
it's more of a line
place.
of responsibility. I call it a line of responsibility, a place. That would be a good way to say it. An alignment that has to take place for things to work.
Well, we've talked about place a lot. What about what we got? Place,
purpose.
Power. Well, what about men having a purpose? Like we talked last time about our job and that becoming who we are. What about purpose? Because we live in a culture, in a world where a lot of guys, 20s and 30s, they don't know who they are. Right. They don't understand what their purpose in life is, so they're just drifting.
Right. Well, again, that's a big question, and I'm glad you asked it, but I think we're getting close to time. So I'm just going to say it this way, and then we'll try to wrap this up, and we'll continue on that next time, because purpose is a big thing. I think everybody's trying to find their purpose. I talk to men, whether they're out here as coaches, whether they work construction jobs, and when we just get on the job and we're talking, one of the things I think they struggle with the most is they're trying to find that purpose. And when they think career as purpose, right? But that's always going to fall short. Certainly that's part of it maybe, but that's a small part. And so to find our purpose, we know inside of us there's something much bigger than that. There has to be. There's
something innately inside of us that we know something bigger than us, and there's something bigger that we're called to.
No doubt, innately. I believe that. And that's why it's a struggle that when we're giving all we can and we're doing everything for this one thing, and we realize, oh wait, I'm not fulfilled, and we're not filling the purpose that God's called us to. So, yeah, the only way to really know that is first when you find your place and you're in line with God. God speaks to us things just like He did to men He chose in the Bible to lead in certain times, and for such a time as this, we're called to lead as men, and I think that God is doing something here. So I'm thankful for what He's doing, even with us talking to this podcast and trying to get some men on fire again to realize we have a place and a purpose. And so we're going to talk more about that purpose next time. We're running out of time. All right. And we'll look forward to that. So look, we just want to say thank y'all for joining us today. We're glad y'all been with us today and being able to listen, and maybe some way God has spoke to your heart. I want to say this: if you're a man and you've had these burdens, right, that no one even knows about because you're trying to be that man, I got to handle it. There's nothing manlier to do than to submit your life to Jesus Christ and submit it to God, who's much bigger than we are. And I promise you, when you get things out of your little hands and get them in God's big hands, He can do a lot more with it. And so we're going to talk about that more, of what His hand looks like in our life and how we can fulfill the purpose that God got for us as men. All right. So thank you for joining the Kingsman podcast. This is just an outreach of our men's ministry out here at Resurrection Life. And thank Todd again for joining us, and we appreciate y'all being with us. So if you want to know more about your purpose as a man, join us next time as we talk about the purpose of God's man.